Welcome everybody back to another episode of Grow Your Tutoring Business. Today we've got the amazing Chrissi with us, who I always start off this way. Like I feel like I'm going to introduce you. I'm not going to introduce you. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. So welcome, Chrissi. Tell us a little bit about yourself and let's just start with your business. So you and your business, what you've been up to.
So I run a tuition business now based in Cornwall. Predominantly, well, I suppose we started just doing English, but now we offer English, maths, and science. And I think, like a lot of people, I started just on my own. And over the space of sort of a year, it's got bigger and bigger as I've not been able to meet demand. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment.
Chrissi, obviously I know you a little bit and been a part of your journey, and we was talking just before actually, and I was saying about like how bad the weather's been. It was a very British conversation about the weather and how rubbish it is. I was saying like the dream is to go on holiday like between January and February. And then you reminded me that you messaged me while you was on holiday during that time. And I think that's probably where I got the idea from, like people chasing the sun. So your business is set up in a way that sounds quite flexible. And not only that, but it sounds like you've gone on a bit of a journey the last kind of 12 months or so. Tell us a little bit about when you started your business, because it's still relatively new.
Yeah, so the business is just over a year old. So I left the classroom April last year. I was a senior assistant head teacher in a local secondary school. And I did quite a bit of work with behaviour and pastoral care as well. My main focus in school was sort of English and literacy, with a specialism in special educational needs. Um, Sort of over the last year before I left, my dad had become quite unwell. And like so many of us, I felt I was being pulled in so many different directions. And I think, like a lot of people, I want to do a good job. And I felt like I was doing a rubbish job at a lot of things. And it was when my dad he became very unwell in Cardiff. And we were driving up there, and I thought, all I can think about is delivering insect training tomorrow.
Mm.
Something has to change. This isn't, when I'm old, I don't want to look back and think all I did was worry about school when there are so many important things. So at that point, I think within 3 days, I'd handed my notice in. I took, I think, about 8 weeks to sort of heal, if you like, or start the healing process, because I think it's actually a very long process to go through. We are institutionalized when we're in school to think that somebody tells us what to do, and then we have to do it. And leaving the classroom, you have to make decisions yourself and say, almost have like a conversation with yourself. It's okay for you to do this. And so it takes a long time to sort of build up the confidence, I think, to be able to do that. I was extremely lucky, and I still am extremely lucky, that I'm very good friends with Sue off the Pit Pony video. So Sue doesn't live too far from me, and it actually took me sort of 2 attempts to leave the classroom. So we met up for a coffee, and then we met up for a coffee about a year later. And I was like, at that point, I didn't know that I was going to go into tuition. I just knew enough was enough. I couldn't carry on the way I was anymore. And so Sue really sort of supported me to get through that really scary bit. And as soon as you get through that bit, you will be okay. It's just making that first step. And then I started to plan my business, which initially was going to be just me, just doing English. And I was quite happy with that. I carried on like that for a few months. I filled very, very quickly. And I think the key with filling for me was, at that point, I just wanted to try everything. I just wanted to know, do I want to carry on doing the 11 plus tuition? Do I want to focus on GCSE? Do I want to focus on home education? So what is it that I like? And because I tried everything, my diary, my calendar got very full very quick. Um, so that was a massive thing, a massive, I suppose, confidence boost as well. I can do this. It is going to be okay. I can pay the mortgage. And then in July, we went to the conference. So again, me and Sue went to the conference. I met some people that I'd had conversations with. So I met lovely Max. I met Ruth, people that connections you make
Mm.
online, but people you actually see face to face. And it was that conference that my mindset just changed. And my husband actually came with me and he said it's almost like a therapy session for teachers, all these
Yeah.
burnt out teachers who've got no
Right.
confidence.
Yeah.
And then you'll go in there for like a therapy session
Yeah.
to improve your confidence. And it was then I remember I was just saying to you, Sharon saying, you are a business owner. And I was like, God, I am a business owner. I need to get on the telephone. I need to do these things. So, and that changed everything for me. It was almost like, yes, if Sharon thinks I can do this, I definitely can do it.
So powerful, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's all,
absolutely.
I think you've done such a good job there of describing that space and what those spaces actually provide. Because I think
Mhm.
it's really hard to explain to people who've never been what they're going to get from the day. Because you can look at the workshops, you can look at the keynotes, and you go, oh, they're going to be interesting. But it still doesn't do it justice, does it? It
Mhm.
doesn't quite do it justice. You have to go and experience it. And I've often said this, that once you start going to them, they actually become quite addictive. Like you go, actually, I want to be
Mm.
part of this, and you take a lot away from them, and they can literally change your lives, literally change your lives. So that's such an eloquent way of describing it. So I hope everybody get. I'm going to put the link for some tickets. I'm going to get this out there ASAP so that people can make their mind up based on your recommendation. Chrissy, you've made, I would say, accelerated business progress compared to what some others would do in a space of a year. What do you put that down to? How do you think you've managed to grow in the way you have over the last 12 months?
I think initially when I first started, um, I had a list of like Facebook groups I wanted to join. And so I joined all those groups. And then to start with, I just watched and I saw what was happening. For me, I knew I wanted to work with home educated children and families, and that's become a very big part of my business. Um, and talking to people, I knew it was quite difficult to get into.
Mm.
So I have some family members who are home educated, and I spoke to my aunts and I said, you know, what is it that home educated families want? What is the difference between working with them and not working with them? And I sort of went from there really. And
Okay.
for me, talking to a lot of the families we work with, and it's different for everybody, the reasons why they're home educated. And I think that's an important thing to know.
Mm.
But for a lot of the families we work with, children have at some point been to school, and for whatever reason, they feel that they've been let down and they're quite almost broken by the system. And so part of our job is to build them back up so they can trust in education and they can start learning. And for me, that's the best part of the job because you are getting kids to love something when they initially thought they were going to hate it and they thought this wasn't going to go well. And it's not just about working with the child, you are working with the families. A parent has been fighting against the system,
Mm.
they feel that they've sort of reached the end, so they've pulled out their child. And then it's supporting them through that. So for me, I actually spend a lot of time speaking to my home educated families about sort of their, their aspirations. What do they want to do? How am I going to support getting them to that point? And I think that's just so key. We don't always have time when we're in school to just sit and listen and take on board and come up with solutions. Because also, there are certain things we have to do when we're worried about filling buckets in terms of
Mm.
progress, whereas we can actually think about what is best for this child. Perhaps doing a GCSE isn't the right thing, and actually doing a functional skills is going to be better for them and their route. So yeah, and I think for me also, leaving the classroom, it is almost like a trauma. You feel, you buy up or you buy into school because you're in love with the idea of I want to be a teacher, I want to make a difference. So when that stops and it comes crumbling down, think, who am I now? what is my next step? So I think as I was building myself up, I was working with these families to also build their confidence up. And so that quite quickly grew, and we have quite a few home educated students now. And I think out of all of my sort of work this year, that's the path that I'm most proud of.
You said earlier on about sort of trying lots of different things at the beginning.
Mhm.
I think people niche too quickly. So I
Mhm.
agree with your approach. I actually quite like the idea of actually let's try a range of things and see what I like doing, because that's, you want to create a business that you really love. And I'm sure anybody watching or listening to you just talk about that there, you can feel the passion and energy around the
Mhm.
home ed and what you do with them, and it makes total sense. And also feel the conflict that that's the way we would like to work in mainstream education, because
Mhm.
it makes
Yeah.
sense to make this education pathway that we have purposeful for all children. And actually, it's a struggle to do that just because of everything that we've
Mhm.
got to cover and got to do. So building this business with those qualities and those values in mind, you think that is where you found that success. What's next for the business? Because that's such a big, like, oh, fast growth. Have you
Mhm.
got a plan of what's next for the business? Is there something else I'd really like to sort of scale, yeah, scale into the next
Yeah.
area? Yeah.
Yeah. So sort of my passion project, if you like, my dream, and it's not going to happen next year, but it might happen the year after. I'm based in Cornwall. Cornwall doesn't have an exam centre for private students. Devon doesn't have a
Wow.
centre either. So that means our home educated students that want to take an exam are having to travel all the way up to Taunton, which is more than 200 miles. For some of these children, they've got special educational needs. So just doing an exam anywhere is very overwhelming. So on my 2-year plan, I would love to open an exam centre for private candidates within Cornwall, um, to really help those students. I would also, or something that I am currently working on is, and I always say it wrong, EOTUS
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
packages. So, and this started with my home ed students. Um, I'm not sure if everybody knows what that is, but EOTA stands for like, educated other than at school. So basically, it means that the council are still responsible for supplying an education for students. And quite often, that package for those students will include some tuition. So we've worked with the local council this year, providing tuition for about 11 children, which has been immensely rewarding. Some of those have then gone on to sit their exams. Some of those students haven't engaged with learning for years. So,
Mm.
you know, it's really passionate. Not sure what's the right word. It's really important, if you like, and it's
Mm.
really important to me. Um, and it's also meant that I've been able to help other tutors, I suppose, work with those students and get into that area. So I would like to continue and sort of branch that out a little bit.
Yeah. Let's just open that door a little bit to the EOTA stuff, which is often, like, from a local council or local authority point of view, put out to tender. So you have to write bids. What's the bid writing like?
Difficult. It's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of things that you are expected to have in place. So I certainly think that if it's something you want to do, you need to think about things that you would almost need if you were going into a school. So, and I mean, not just things like your DBS, things like insurance, but insurance which is much more extensive than it would be if you were on your own. Um, Things like you need to make sure your safeguarding policy, you have a safeguarding policy, but not just a safeguarding policy, a safeguarding procedure. So what happens in that instance? Things like you have to have a designated safeguarding lead. And so for me, I've had to think about things like when I'm off in Lanzarote and although I do take my phone with me because I'm a bit naughty, who is going to be sort of my deputy if something happens? So
Mm.
I'm now having to put these things into place. So yeah, I mean, I'm just about to submit one and it's got 20 documents attached with it. So it is quite difficult to go through the bid, if you like. But I would say it's more than worth it because making those connections is huge as well. And I'm really lucky that I have a good relationship with our local council now. But I fell into it quite accidentally, and then I was invited to a meeting, and it just, I suppose, went like that. But I think that shows how important networking is and saying yes to these opportunities instead of just thinking, I'm just going to do this. Think, okay, let's just go and see what they have to say. And then it sort of goes from there.
Uh, with the EOTAS kind of work, that's mainly during the day.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So normally just during the school day
Yeah.
and then holidays, based on where the council is, would be you would be off, you wouldn't work those
Yeah.
holidays.
So I mean, there'll be people saying, "Oh, how do I get into it?" Well, there's a number of ways. First of all, you might go and write bids, or you go and find someone like Chrissy who has written the bid, and there's work
Mhm.
there. So there you might go and like work for an agency, or you might be employed by somebody depending on their business model. Because if you get one of the tenders, often it's quite a lot of hours that you would be needing to cover, which would mean you would need tutors to go and cover that work, right? That's kind of how that works. Are you face to face?
Both.
You do a bit of both.
Do a bit of both. So, and that's for our EOTA students as well. Some
Yeah.
of them um, will only do online learning, and some of them will only do face-to-face learning. We also do online groups, um, which have been very popular, and we've just started to do face-to-face home ed groups. So yeah, a lot going on.
Yeah, that's huge. So many. So how do you juggle everything? How do you manage to stay on top of the admin, all the stuff you need to do in the business? What do you think is the biggest thing that you have to do, or the most important thing in your business that really like drives the growth, like outside of writing bids?
So for me, the the reason parents would come to us would be the communication. It's talking to the families because it is working with families, not just the child. And for me, as a secondary school teacher, that was a little bit strange to start with. But
Yeah.
actually, we're all one big team working together to get this child to where they want to be, where they need to be for whatever reason. In terms of admin, and accounts and all that. I found at certain points this year, as my virtual staff room would tell you, quite overwhelming. And I've had to sort of step back and think, actually, in order for the business to grow and in order for me to keep my sanity, I need to start surrounding myself by people who are going to help me. So I've taken on a HR department. So I work with somebody called Mike, who's brilliant, who's been helping me out. I've got a fantastic accountant who I probably speak to every week. She's probably sick of speaking to me. And at the moment, I'm looking to take on a virtual assistant as well. So yeah, but groups like this are brilliant because there's so much information on there, and you can sort of speak to quite a few different people and work out what is it that I actually need. Because I think when a business grows quite quickly, it can become quite overwhelming. You think, oh, I don't know where to go next, and you don't want it to plateau as well. So thinking, right, my time is actually quite valuable. And I remember speaking to you and you saying £10 job, £100 job. And I have started thinking about, right, does it need to be me doing this or can somebody else do it?
It's quite hard to identify, I think, as well. And I think even once, this is me speaking from experience, even once I have identified the £10 task, £100 tasks, I'm like, oh, I still quite like doing those ones. Or like, oh,
Mm.
do I want to let go? And I've figured out that I'm way more of a control freak than what I ever gave myself credit for. Like I found it really difficult to let go. I'm practicing. I'm practicing it, and I don't know if anybody's listening or watching is like me, like it can be quite an uncomfortable process, but you cannot work on things like bids for local councils if you're stuck still designing on Canva and scheduling all your posts, onboarding every single new person, or doing every single onboarding call, those kind of things, or manning the emails, and all of the small little tasks that you have to do as a sole trader. But if you're getting to the point where you are, or you want to employ other people and you want to grow something, you want to grow a business into kind of the next phase, have to be able to let go of stuff, don't you?
And I think as teachers, we're so used to being, and like if you like, control freaks, because we're
Mm.
so used to just doing it all ourselves. And now we've become business owners. It is changing that mindset to think, actually, I want to get to here. I can't do it on my own. What do I need to do? And I can make these decisions.
How do you go around the priority of that prioritization or identification of those tasks? How did you kind of determine which was important, should be done by you, or which ones could be done by someone else?
Um, I think for me, it was thinking about which ones are my family's going to know if somebody else has done or whether it's me. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
yeah, that's
So,
a
for
really good way of
instance,
doing it. Yeah.
if I pick up the phone, they know it's me they're
Mm,
talking to. But if they get an invoice, it doesn't matter if it's me or not because they
mm.
don't know because they don't have that I suppose contact. So I've started to think about things more like that.
That's been a little bit more using systems and processes, or maybe people in your business.
Mm,
If you're at that stage, it's probably worth just putting a little bit here around. If you are at that stage and you're not sure where to go next, virtual assistants are great for this,
mhm,
and most will offer you like a 20-minute, half an hour consultation just to talk things through. And I know that really helped me because I could identify the tasks, but then I was like, I didn't know which ones that I could give, and then the process around that. And having that conversation with a couple of VAs, virtual assistants, that was really beneficial to me. Going, okay, that makes sense to me. I'm going to work with this person because I know they're an expert in X, Y, Z. Not only can they save me time from doing it, they're probably going to do it better than what I can anyway. So it's a win-win, and in most cases, it doesn't cost too much money. And I think we have to use the word cost differently. I tend to say, well, that's an investment now. It's an investment into the
mm,
business when you have these people around you, like the investment in somebody specializing in HR. That
yeah.
just makes so much sense when you're at a certain level because it can be a legal nightmare if you're not careful. And to have that kind
Mhm.
of expertise on hand is amazing. Can we talk a little bit about your kind of move towards becoming a teacher in the first place, Chrissy? So did you have like who were your inspirations? Was there somebody like maybe coming through school yourself that you kind of looked at and thought, yeah, I really want to be like this person? Or was it just something that you always desired to be?
I think I'm the eldest of six. So I think I've always wanted to look
Mm,
after and support, I suppose, those that are younger than me. But growing up, so certainly through primary school, I really, really struggled learning to read in particular. And I remember the frustration of not being able to do it. Um, and so by the time I think I got to secondary school, I was like, oh, I'd really like to be an English teacher. I'd really like to help people like me. And I had an amazing English teacher. And I still remember now her sitting with her legs crossed on the desk reading Pride and Prejudice to us and us all just sort of being like, Mr. Darcy. Um, so
mm,
after that, did my A levels, I left school, and I kind of just thought, I'm not good enough at English. I can't do this. I'm not able to impart knowledge to these youngsters. And so I left and sold wedding dresses for a little bit. And then I went and worked in NatWest. Um, so I worked as a customer advisor, sort of supporting loans and mortgages, working with staff there on the tills. And then I had my second son, and I was like, no, I really want to do this. It's still calling me
mm.
to go back. And I did some volunteering in a local secondary school. And I was like, actually, I think I could really engage some of these young people. So I moved my whole family down from Wales to Cornwall, where my mum was so she could help with the childcare, and I trained to become a teacher. And still I'm so passionate about education and the difference it makes, not just in terms of the knowledge that the students pick up, but the confidence and care you give somebody that they don't forget when they've left your classroom or when they leave your office or your Zoom call. And the students who I've tutored, like even this year, like parents will message me like pictures of prom dresses, and I think at the start of this year this child cried for a full hour and thought I couldn't do this, and now they're doing this.
Mm.
So yeah, I've worked quite heavily in pastoral care and then went over to more English, but I still think I'm so lucky that I get to work in education, and I'm really pleased now that I get to support other people doing it the way they want to do it, just like
Mm.
I can.
Do you think there were any skills you learned through all of that process? This original question was, what skills did you sort of bring from teaching into business? But your route in, like through selling wedding dresses and working in NatWest, and then becoming a teacher, what skills do you think you learned along the way that has supported your business growth?
I think for me, I think I've sort of hinted at it already, is people. Business is people. You are, when people sign up for tuition, they're signing up for me, they're buying me, okay? And if they have tutoring with one of my tutors, they're trusting that the tutor I've put them with is the best person that they can have. And I genuinely feel that when I match a tutor to a student. And just because they're with that tutor doesn't mean the connection just ends. The conversations keep going. And it's not just, like I said, about what they're learning. It's about how are they as a person, oh, did they manage to get through that football trial? What are they thinking of their new football team? But that has certainly come from, I would say, yeah, working for the bank for 10 years or whatever it was. And all of my work there was talking to people, finding out about their lives. And that's exactly the same as running a business. And I don't think it matters whether it's tutoring or what it is, any service, you're buying a person. I suppose I'm very lucky that, although I'd say I hate maths, I've got quite a good brain, if you like, for thinking, oh, well, it costs this much, I have to make this much to cover this. This is a good business decision. Um, so especially with looking at groups, I sort of set a figure in my mind and think, if I don't hit this, I'm going to give it this amount of time, and then I'll pull it and we'll try something else. We'll look at why it didn't work.
Mm.
So it's constantly reflecting. I suppose that comes from teaching, doesn't it? What is good about this? What's making it work? What isn't making it work?
In a way, I kind of wish teaching was more like that. I remember the
Mm,
training year or years being like that a lot, and it was really beneficial. And then outside the NQT year, it kind of
mm,
disappeared. Well, not disappear, but it was harder to fit it in. The reflective work that used to happen after every session, you was forced to keep diaries and journals, and you've written your reflective piece at the end of your lesson plan. Not that I really wanted everybody to do that every lesson, but there is something to be said for being reflective, without a doubt. Chrissy, one last like question around the business stuff.
mm.
When you were making that decision to come away from teaching, full-time teaching, because of that whole, and it sounded like you made that decision fairly quickly. It was like, right, 3 days later, resignation was
Mm.
in. What was happening around you? What were the messages were you hearing from like your partner, your husband, like your family, like close friends? Were they all supportive of it? Was there any kind of negative noise?
From family and friends, they were all like, you should have done this years ago.
Right.
Yeah, you can't carry on like this. You're burning out. And I think I realised I also have a medical condition, so I've got Crohn's.
Mm.
Um, and so I knew I was making myself ill by making the decision to stay in school. Because I think so often we talk about making the decision to leave. Well, actually, I was making a decision to stay at that point. Um, my husband was desperate for me to leave the classroom. My teenagers, again, were very, it's really lovely. We see you now, Mum. We can do things. Some people in school were not as supportive, but I think actually you know you best, and the people who really love and care for you know what's best for you. I think it's so, so scary because, especially if you've been in school for a few years, you think, well, what else can I do? You're so used to getting up at a certain time, then going into school and doing this and doing this. So the thought of not doing it and doing
Mm.
something different is just absolutely terrifying. And I keep saying to people, once you get past that point of there is another world out there, you can go to the toilet when you want to go to the toilet. You
Yeah.
don't have to, you know, train
Yeah.
your bladder to
Mm.
wait all day. Then you start to think, actually, I can do this. And I mean, when I'd made the decision to leave, and I hadn't at that point decided I was going to tutor, my mum was very good actually. She was like, it's fine, you can do some cleaning if worse comes to worse, but it won't come to that, it'll be fine. But I think, yeah, I'd reached a point where I knew it was time. Otherwise, I was going to start hating my job. And it wasn't living at that point, I was just working.
So it sounds like you that some people end up having to handle some negative
Mhm.
like messaging around them because I think we're all well, I think we are definitely all institutionalized. The people who are either working 9 to 5 jobs or perhaps have not seen the other way that we could live our lives, which is kind of like the digital age, really, is what we're talking about. Like
Yeah.
any of us could start a small business online, doing anything, and it's likely to, as long as it's relatively okay, and even just slightly better than good, you probably make a go whatever business idea you have. But people are so transfixed on, and I think teaching in particular, that right, you're a teacher, go to school, do your 7:30 till 4:30, come home, get your half decent salary every month. Why on earth would you want to leave that stability? And I know we all, people listening, and yourself and me will understand that the pressure of teaching, it goes well beyond that 7:30 till 4:30 window. It goes well beyond that, and it's just not a very. It depending on where you are, because I like to caveat there are really good schools out there, and some people are really happy, and I'm really happy that we don't want to take all the good teachers out of school, but there's another way to make £3,000 a month where you don't
Mhm.
have to make yourself stressed and have unrealistic expectations put on you or whatever that may be. That was the bit where I started to change. I mean, or started my mindset started to switch away from realize or having a better understanding that I don't have to keep saying yes to some of these demands.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when I started to break it down, and again, I was scared about it, and I ended up being forced. Because it was even before I wanted to leave teaching. I'd read The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you've read that, but it
Mhm.
blew my mind about how people were working 4 hours a week, and that's unrealistic for most of us. But let's use that as a caveat. Um, and earning millions of pounds. Like, how can that be true when here we are, skilled individuals, like changing people's lives, and yet I can't even take my family on holiday. I can barely afford to run a car, and I wasn't enjoying some holidays because there was no money to spend. Or I'm saying you have to have money to be happy, but it was hard to be happy in that environment because of the level of stress and demand that was put on our lives. So to be able to step away and be brave enough to go, do you know, I'm going to do something else. And I probably similar to a similar story to you is I kind of waited for it to be as bad as it could be. I don't know if it was as bad as it could be for you. It maybe felt it at the time. You're like, actually, if I carry on down this path, this is like really bad. I waited for that lowest moment. It was there. I didn't realize it was the lowest moment, but that it was kind of forced upon me. How and you mentioned about that recovery as well, and I'll
Mhm.
chip in on this because I know that it took me quite a long time. How did you start that healing process? What was it that you handed in resignation and you said like 2 to 3 months you just sort of began to kind of feel a little bit better? Was there anything, I'm not saying a magic wand approach, but what were you doing that was helping you?
I think for me, and I'd say I'm still in recovery, if you
Yeah.
like. I wonder if I'll ever not be in recovery.
Yeah.
But for me, it was, well, lots of different things. I think almost like a grieving process. You
Yeah.
go through the stages, don't you? Of I'm
Yeah.
angry, why am I in this position? Why couldn't I make it work? And I wasn't angry with anybody. I was really lucky. I came from a school, or I left a school I really loved.
Mm.
Um, and then I suppose working through that process and then having people around me really supporting me. And honestly, if people could take one thing away from this, I would say surround yourself with people who are there for you, are genuine and there for you. So I know in terms of tutoring, we all have wobbles, but I could pick up the phone and speak to Sue or Matt, who are, I suppose, if you like, my work besties, and they'll get me back on track and it will be fine. When I was healing, I spent a lot of time with my family, sort of my children, my husband, and just my poor husband just must have heard me talk, 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 talk. And I slept. I did so much sleeping because I was just absolutely exhausted.
Mm.
Um, and I think realizing then, and I already said going to the conference, I don't think I had realized until that point how almost damaged I was. I felt completely like all I ever wanted to be was a teacher, and now I'm not a teacher.
Mm.
My identity was completely stripped, and I had to build a new identity. So I had to think about what was it that I liked about being a teacher. So in terms of recovery, I suppose I almost felt, and I don't know if other people feel like this, ashamed to say I was a tutor. And I think so many people feel like
Mm.
tutoring is the poor cousin of teaching. And it's actually when you start to realize they can't do this without me, actually. I'm a valued member. I've been working in a school this year, and I've absolutely loved it, tutoring, and they appreciate all of the team going in so, so much. And it just makes me feel like actually I've made something that I can be proud of. So I think it's that, no, you're a tutor, you're a business owner. Don't be ashamed of that. You should
Mm.
be really, really proud of it, actually, because
Mm.
education needs it. Society might think teaching's the main thing and tutoring's just a side job, but it's not.
Mm.
Sorry, I think I might have steered off the question there.
No, no, that's cool, and I think it naturally led there. I presented some awards the other evening. I was honoured to I didn't really present them. I just read out names off a card. But there were sections, right? So there were the beginning part was individual tutors, the middle part were bigger business, basically corporates that earn under 1 million, and the last part was tuition companies that earn over 1 million. So nobody could now convince me that tuition is not a serious business when you've got people on stage running multi-million pound businesses. Look, I'm not saying we're all going to get to that point because some of us won't want to. Some of us don't even want to put the energy in that direction. But what you can do is create yourself a much, I say better life, but also a life which still has the same impact as you was having before as a teacher. This identity thing was a really big thing for me a little while ago, and I connected with some people who were, I don't know if they're experts, whether we'd call them that, but I had one come on the podcast about 6 months ago, and it was fascinating just like talking about this whole unwrapping yourself, because we are just, what I felt, I was just a teacher. I'd even stopped at that point, probably being even a dad, like, because I was never home. So
Mhm.
all I ever did was teach, and I'd go home and I'd have to mark, and then I'd get up at 6 in the morning and I'd start all over again every single day. So for me, it was about unwrapping or some of those
Mhm.
things. Again, I'm not just this thing, like this teacher, this person that goes in and supports everybody else's families. I'm much bigger than that. And even now, as a business owner, definitely see myself as a business owner. Like, I'm not just a business owner. There's other stuff that makes me me, and I feel quite proud of that now. Whereas I felt the same, ashamed that I wasn't a teacher anymore when I first left. It was like a I didn't want to admit it to people. And that wasn't even about being a tutor. It was just about saying, I'm not a teacher anymore. And that felt really uncomfortable. And it took a long
Mm.
while. It was a grieving, but like I wrote down that because it was a grieving process. It was.
Mm.
It's just, and it's tough. It was quite tough to get over. And we do have to say all those things that you've said. Surround yourself with people who are going to support you. Surround yourselves with people who are going to just reaffirm what you're doing and what you're trying to become. Oh, it makes such a big difference.
Mm.
It
Yeah, it
does.
really does. And I think, like I said, if you can do anything, if you're planning to leave the classroom now, I'd look to see if there's almost like a tutor in your area, because
Mm,
we are a very friendly community,
mm,
um, who you can make those connections with, because it makes such a difference.
yeah. Right. Last question. Top tips for somebody who is either just about to start or right at the beginning of their journey. So where you were just over 12 months ago, what would be your
Mm.
number one tip?
Number one tip, um, try everything.
Try everything.
And by that, try everything. So don't just say I'm 11 plus, don't just say I'm GCSE, or don't just say I'm primary. I've got primary tutors who do Key Stage 3, and they're some of my best tutors. So say yes and see what it is you love.
I love it, Chrissi. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this space with you.
You're very welcome.
And we're seeing you at the conference.
Definitely.
Great. Well, we'll see you there. And hopefully some people listening will go, oh, definitely to do this now. I'll have the link to the tickets everywhere. Right, we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you.
All right. Bye now.